Hello everyone, I'm back again, and I just had a little bit of trouble remembering what I did last time, so I'm back. I'm back using Otter, and this is my blog about technology, May the 16th, 2011. A long time no hear. My last episode was in March. This episode will mostly deal with retrocomputing and a few other things. I'm going to first make a few parenthetical remarks about Linux and CPUs. I really liked the P3, as I've mentioned before, as it generates less heat. And I'm actually using a P3 right now, a P3 866 megahertz CPU. It's the fastest available. The fastest available CPU for slot 1 is Pentium 3, 1133 megahertz or 1.1 gigahertz. Okay, I've been doing a little bit of research on Acer and Linux distros, and I found out that you can use a distro called Linpus, which is a derivative of Fedora. And I believe the newest one is actually a derivative of Fedora 14. Okay, for example, let's say you went out and you got an Acer, a relatively new Acer like a X3810. This bodes well for people who buy Acer computers. They can actually be reasonably sure that their Acer box will run Linux well, and I can personally verify that it works good on X3810. Okay, just a few other miscellaneous comments. I've started browsing the web at 1280 by 1024, and although it does seem that the web is mostly optimized for 1024 by 768 resolution. Okay, so anyway, with the wider screen, it's you get more information on there, obviously. Okay, one other remark before I go on to the next topic. I've stopped using wireless keyboards and mice. They're just a pain in the butt. The batteries just die really quickly, and there's seems like there's lots of situations where your keyboard's too far away, or it's tilted at the wrong angle, and it just stops working, and it's just a total pain. So I'm just going to tell people not to bother with them. I've stopped using them. Okay, now I'm just going to make a few comments about KDE, the desktop environment. I use 3.5.10, and I have the keyboard I'm using right now is just like a generic 104 key keyboard. So one of the things you can do is you can go into Control Center and Regional and Accessibility and Keyboard Outlay, or rather keyboard layout, and you can actually turn XKB options on. So I enable XKB options, and then I have compose key options. So actually I set the right Windows key. Yeah, the Windows key. I know it's a Windows keyboard. A lot of these keyboards I have actually have a Windows key on that, and I'm not really endorsing Windows. It's just as a totally pragmatic matter. You go out there and everything you see has got the Windows key on it, or the Macintosh key, whatever key they use. I'm sure it's roughly equivalent. And you know, I love to go out there and buy a nice Commodore keyboard or a nice Linux specific keyboard, but so far they just don't have them in the local stores, and I just haven't found a reseller online that can give me a good deal. I know that there must be one out there somewhere. I just haven't found a good one yet. Anyways, the comment I'm making is you can use the compose key to do a lot of really interesting things to get characters that are normally not available on your keyboard. So before I go much further into this, I will mention that you need to have the right fonts to get the full benefit of the compose key, because it's like sometimes you'll find that in whatever distro you're using that sometimes the compose key doesn't work the way you expect it to. That's because sometimes you'll just do nothing. You'll go like this is my example. Instead of saying the Windows key, I'm just going to say it generically and say I'm going to use the compose key. So for example, you could do compose key, capital L, and then dash, and then you get a pound sign, like for British currency. But if the font that you're using in your terminal program, like well, let's say you're using console, for example, if it's not supporting the font that has that symbol, then it'll just do nothing. Okay, most of the time you'll get some of the special symbols, but you may not get all of them because there's just a huge number of Unicode symbols possible. Like I think it's over 100,000 possible symbols. So anyway, you know, here's another example. Go compose key, C, and then vertical bar, and then you get the cent sign. Or you can go compose key, capital Y, equal sign, and get the I think it's the yen sign for Japanese currency. So there's a lot of possibilities. I'm just scratching the surface here. Basically, it's compose key something something, and then the special key you want will appear, hopefully. And when I spent a lot of time researching this, and it was kind of frustrating. And I found out about a whole bunch of symbols that I'll probably never use. One of them is the Pilcrow sign, or it's also called a paragraph mark. And to get that, you go compose key P exclamation mark, and you get this weird symbol. It kind of looks like a pie, the symbol for pi. And you can do all sorts of funky things. You can compose key, lowercase u, /, and that gets you the micro sign, and I can go on and on and on. And I've been experimenting. And one of these symbols, I'm using Vector Linux, and I just couldn't get it to do the degree symbol. Looks like a little tiny circle. And I did eventually get it to do it, but I had to start Xterm up with and then specify a specific font. Now, if you look on the internet for information on Unicode and UTF-8 as they call it, then you should be able to figure out what precise font you need to have on your system, and your terminal program has to be aware of the font. And sometimes you can actually say, okay, Xterm, go ahead and use this particular font, and that's actually how I got it to work. And I could do the degree sign, the degree symbol, and I could do what euro sign, and pretty much everything I could do. There wasn't anything I couldn't do, but it did have to have that particular font. So sometimes when you're on eBay and you're selling things, and you want to say, oh, I'm selling a £1 stamp, for example. Well, it's nice if you can just be able to, you know, just go compose and then the pound symbol pops up. And I'm sure, you know, there's other cases where it might be handy as well for all sorts of things. Like there's negation and microsign, broken bar, and a million other things. You know, it's just they're all there. You know, if you can just figure out how, like, which key sequence. Now remember, to do all this stuff, you know, on your system it might be different, but I'm using KDE 3.5.10, and basically to start you off, you have to be able to get your desktop environment to turn on the XKB options, and then you select a key. You select some key on your keyboard that you're not really using for anything else, and then select that key as your compose key. Okay, I'm moving on to the next topic, and let's see what I've got here. Okay, I just wanted to talk about retrocomputing a little bit, and you know, I've talked a lot about how long can a computer last, and I'm just going to give you a few examples. I'll start from the newest to the oldest. Now, in my case, I use a lot of older computers. I like using older computers. There's some software that I wrote that I never really finished. That now I'd like to go back and actually finish those programs. And unless you have the older computer and the older operating system, then that's not going to happen. And you can learn things. Sometimes there's things that the old systems can do that the new systems can't do. Okay, so from newest to oldest, I'll just rhyme them off here. We got a Dell DX110, a computer from 2001. By the way, the Dell DX110 is 9 years old. Next oldest one is 10 years old. It's the computer. It's just a generic computer, white box computer, QDI motherboard. It's from 2001, so it's 10 years old. I have a server that the motherboard is from 1998. That's my tie-in board, and it's 13 years old and counting. And the oldest one, and in some ways my favorite one, is the Amiga 500. And I'm just going to drink a little bit of water here. And that's from 1987, and that's 24 years old. Still work. Everything on it works. Okay. Now, in my experience with personal computers, the parts that you're most likely going to need to replace or repair are the CMOS battery. Those tend to last about 4 years. The hard drive will go at some point. Hopefully, you'll get 10 years out of it, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get a lot less than 10 years. The power supply, and to a lesser degree, the monitor. Those are the things I find go the most often. Like in theory, if you had replacement parts for every single computer part in your system, you could keep the computer running indefinitely. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the Amiga again, and I used to own an Amiga a long time ago. Then I very foolishly sold it, and then I just got, I wish I had the Amiga 500 back, and so I went out and I got another one. And this one's got 1 meg. It's a pretty simple system. It's got 1 megabyte of RAM, and I've done some really interesting, fun things with it. I've connected it so that it can communicate with my Linux box, and I actually have a data switch on it so that it can communicate with different computers. Right now, it's actually communicating in 2 ways. It can communicate via its serial port or the parallel port. Okay, so on the Amiga 500, what it has is a DB25 male connector for serial communications. And on the Linux side, the PC's got a DE9 male connector. So you got to have, obviously, you got to have the null modem and 9-pin on the PC side, most likely. And then on the Amiga side, it's 25-pin. And the first, okay, so let's assume you got all the cabling right and everything's working good. You might find, if you get one of these, you buy a used Amiga on eBay, sometimes you'll get an Amiga and then, okay, you got the Amiga, but you don't have any discs, right? Okay, that's bad. That's no good, because you're gonna, to do any of this, what I'm talking about, you're gonna at least have to have Workbench 1.2. Okay, I'm talking about Amiga 500, so you could have Workbench 1.2 or Workbench 1.3. Either one is fine. Okay, so like I'm assuming you've got the cabling right and you've got the Workbench disks. Okay, so and you got a working Amiga and you got a Linux box. Okay, so now you're ready to go. Initially, I sent a basic program over to the Amiga. What I did, I just catted a file, then redirected it to /dev/tty S0. And so basically, I'm going through the first serial port to transfer this text file. Okay, and okay, so I got the text file on the Amiga side, so now I can run this basic program on the Amiga. And then after that, what I did was I started sending binary, using this simple terminal program that was written in BASIC. I could send over my first binary file. Okay, so I used a program I found on the internet called transdisk, and I got that file over to the Amiga using this simple BASIC program, a simple terminal program. Okay, so now we got transdisk, trans disk on the Amiga, and I had to use another program called ADF Sender, which is actually a Windows program, which I was running under Wine using Linux. Okay, so and that worked, much to my surprise. So yeah, I have got serial communications to work under Wine. So any Windows program that uses serial communications, my experience has been that I have been able to get that to work. Just to fill you in on a few more details. The ADF files are sent from the Linux box to the Amiga, and that's ADF stands for Amiga Disk File. It's a binary file that holds all the information that 1 3.5-inch diskette can hold. Okay, and what the Amiga does, what happens basically is using the trans disk on the Amiga side and another program called ADF Sender on the Linux side, which is actually running under Wine. What that does is it writes out the ADF file track by track to the Amiga's 3.5-inch drive. Okay, so you're going to need some. Okay, so basically to do this, you're going to need some double density disks, double-sided, double density DSDD disks or diskettes. And the Amiga will write this diskette track by track as the information is sent over, and eventually you'll have a bootable disk, a complete disk of whatever it happens to be. Okay, and there's another program called APC-COM or APC-COMM, and I used that program to communicate between the Linux box and the parallel port on the Amiga, and I was getting over 30K per second, so it's much faster. So basically I have one of those parallel lab link ports or cables, and okay, so that was good, but the only thing is I haven't figured out a way to do ADF files for the parallel port, which would be a lot better. That might be possible. I still have to figure out how to do that though. Okay, so one of the downsides of owning an Amiga 500 in the modern age, or the current year that it is, 2011, one of the downsides is that it's hard to find a hard drive interface or an Ethernet interface. It's hard to get your Amiga 500 working on the internet. Now, you know, it's a really old computer, 1987, and that makes it difficult. There's nothing. You can connect a modem easily to it because the modem is just DB25 serial, and you know, go off and do net zero or whatever dial-up internet, I suppose. You know, I think that would be relatively easy to do. But on the Amiga 500, it's you want to do Ethernet. I still haven't really figured out a way to do that. There's something they call the A560 ArcNet adapter. Now, one of these sold on eBay recently for over $1,000. So, and even if you did get one, you still wouldn't be able to, you know, plug in the DSL modem to your Amiga. Maybe there's a way to do that. I haven't figured out any way of doing that yet. So I've talked to other Amiga owners, and they're basically telling me that they're not using their computers for web browsing. The web browsers on the Amiga, even the Amiga 3000 and 4000, are relatively primitive compared to what we have on Linux, and they just don't bother. So maybe it's not worth it. Jury's still out on that a little bit, but obviously it's not an easy thing to do. Okay, but on the plus side, the Amiga 500 is great for games. I've been having tons of fun on it. I've been playing Mission Impossible, or Impossible Mission 2. I've been playing Chess Master 2000. And one of the good things about slower computers is that, you know, you actually have a chance to beat them at chess, whereas on a faster computer it's obviously much harder. And I've been playing this puzzle game called Pipe Dream, and I've been using the mouse. I got the mouse, and I got a joystick. I'm actually using a joystick that was designed for the Sega Genesis, and that works. They both have 9-pin, like a DE connector, 9-pin for the joystick. And the Sega Genesis uses basically the same controller, except that it only uses one button. The Amiga only uses one fire button. And this joystick, I've got some fancy thing. It's got 6 buttons on it, and only one of the buttons is actually working. But that's okay, because that's all the Amiga can use. So, okay, I'm just going to make some general remarks about Internet Relay Chat, IRC. I'm using XChat on Linux, and mostly I'm using the IRC network known as Freenode, and which is available from the domain name chat.freenode.net. And it's one of the more interesting channels for me is the classic computing channel, and it's actually Sharp Classic CMP, all one word. Okay, that's the name of the channel that I go into, and it's a really interesting channel. It's full of really knowledgeable people that talk about classic computers like the Amiga and the Commodore PET and the DEC PDP systems. Some of them even use teletypewriters. They go out and they find these old archaic devices, and they talk about older mainframe systems like IBM 4381, and just salvaging old computers in general. And they do a lot of scanning of old computer manuals and coding forms. I even have some of the old coding forms myself. I have CDC, COBOL, and Fortran coding forms, which I haven't used in a very long time. But these guys, they say, hey, scan them and send them to me. So it's interesting that people are interested in stuff like that. And I've learned all sorts of stuff. I've learned about in the old PDP-11s that people were using in the 1970s. They were loading and saving to paper tape. There were some schools and businesses in the 70s, and they couldn't afford disk drives. So they used, it's amazing. They used paper tape to load and save their programs. So although with paper tape you did have one advantage, and that's it was relatively durable. As long as it didn't get wet or set on fire, the paper can last over 100 years probably. So it may end up being, paper tape might actually end up being more durable than 3.5-inch diskettes or magnetic tape. Although, of course, paper tape is voluminous, and you'd have to have a long paper tape for a very sophisticated program. But another thing you have to remember, some of these PDP-11s, they had 32K of memory, right? So they had, some of these old systems had less memory than a Commodore 64 did. So you might not feel too, you might not be warming up to that sort of nostalgia, that level of nostalgia, because it's just, I guess it's just getting one of these old beasts working again that gives people a sense of accomplishment, or a sense that they've salvaged some old piece of technology and get it working again. So they really get enthusiastic about this sort of stuff, and it's infectious. Sometimes I think, I kind of feel like I'm missing out here. But one of the things you also have to remember about these PDP systems is that they used a lot of power, right? They were more expensive to run, electrically speaking, and they didn't have like a modern switching power supply. They had I don't really understand it completely, but these old power supplies, they chewed up a lot of energy, and they were more expensive to run. So some of these people don't have their computers turned on all the time. These old PDP-11s, they just turn them on, fool around with them a bit, and they don't have them running 24/7. It'd be crazy to do that, because it's so expensive to run them. Okay, so that's basically all I had to say, and thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.